So the war in West Asia continues unabated. It is now day 14 that has begun. The last 2 weeks have witnessed relentless attacks by the Americans and the Israelis on the Iranians. And the American President Donald Trump is claiming that Iran is about to surrender. That's what he claims. But on the ground, though, there's nothing of the kind that can be witnessed. Thousands of Iranians, including its top leadership, was out on the streets in open defiance on the occasion of the Al-Quds Day. Now, Trump's flip-flop on the war has continued. While he claims that the United States and Israel has won the war, he's also added that they'll continue to hit Iran very hard over the course of the next week. Additionally, the American Secretary of War Pete Hegseth has claimed again that Iran has got no air defenses, air force or navy left. He's also insisted that its missile volume has been reduced by more than 90%. And Pete Hegseth has alleged that Iran's new leader, Mujtaba Khamenei, is wounded, and he says that he's been disfigured.
Between our Air Force and that of the Israelis, over 15,000 enemy targets have been struck. That's well over 1,000 a day. No other combination of countries in the world can do that. So today, as we speak, we fly over the top of Iran and Tehran. Fighters and bombers all day, picking targets as they choose.
All right, so that is the American Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, there, claiming that about 15,000 targets in Iran have been struck. Now, Trump also believes that Iran is about to surrender. In a call with the leaders of the G7 nations, the American president reportedly suggested that there were no officials left alive in Tehran with the power to make the decision. However, his claim does not align with a much more complex reality that is playing out on the ground in Iran. Now, West Asia continues to face the brunt of Iran's retaliatory attacks. In the latest, Iran has launched a missile that has struck central Israel. Smoke plumes were seen rising in a place called Beit Dan, and firefighters were seen putting out the fire. In Tel Aviv in central Israel, sirens sounded and air defenses were activated. Explosions were heard of interceptions overhead.
I can say at this stage that we have no casualties in any apartment. The main arena is currently being treated following the firefighters department. Finally, the forces will enter inside to search inside the place. I ask at this stage that citizens not to come, not only curious citizens but all. We need to access the area and all arenas with the open axes.
Now, previously, the RGC aerospace commander said that Tehran had fired about 30 super heavy 1- and 2-ton missiles on enemy targets in the region. The Iranian missiles have hit Israeli commercial hub of Tel Aviv. Now, the Europeans who have jumped into this war have also suffered a casualty. A French soldier has been killed in a drone attack on the troops carrying out a training exercise in Iraq's autonomous Kurdistan region. Turkey has leveled a big charge. It has said that the NATO air defenses shot down a third ballistic missile that was fired towards its territory. The country is warned against any more such attacks. So far, Israel claims to have struck about 7,000 targets in Iran in its first 2 weeks of Operation Roaring Lion, including 4,700 that were struck against the Iranian missile program. In an open show of defiance, there were thousands of Iranians who were out on the streets in city after city like Tehran, Mashhad and Isfahan for the annual Al-Quds Day. All right, so this is what the people in Iran are doing, even as the Americans and the Israelis continue with their relentless bombardment. But the Iranians say that they're simply not scared of these American and Israeli bombs. The demonstrators chanted death to America and death to Israel while carrying the Iranian flags and posters of the Khameneis. And even the top leadership of Iran, including President Masoud Pezeshkian, were out on the streets. There you see the Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian interacting with the common people there. The Supreme National Security Council Secretary Ali Larijani and Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi also joined the Al-Quds March in Tehran.
با مردم در کنار مردم در آخرین نفس و تا آخرین لحظه در مقابل اونها بایستیم. در زیر این باران و در زیر این به هیچ وجه نخواهد.
But large explosions have rocked Tehran, with the intensity so high that many residents reported that their houses shook. A dramatic moment was captured on camera, whereas a blast took place in the backdrop as Iran's judiciary's chief, Ghulam Hussein Mohseni, was speaking to the media at the Al-Quds rally in Tehran. At least one person was killed in this bombing.
این تابلو نمی‌ترسن. مردم ملاحظه می‌کنند. در زیر این باران و در زیر این به هیچ وجه نخواهد.
All right, now to put things in perspective and as to where this war is now headed, we are joined this broadcast by Professor Giorgio Caffero, who is a professor of Georgetown University. He's joining us live from Washington, D.C. Professor Caffero, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on WION. Now, this is what Donald Trump is saying, that Iran is ready to surrender. But looking at what is playing out on the ground, the fact that the Strait of Hormuz is now being shut for almost about 2 weeks now, there is very little traffic that is passing through the Strait of Hormuz, and the Iranian leadership is out on the streets in clear defiance of what the Americans and the Israelis are saying. What do you think is the situation in this war at this moment?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me back on your program. Always good to be your guest. I think that what Trump is talking about, this imminent Iranian capitulation, is totally disconnected from the reality on the ground. There are no indicators to suggest that Tehran is on the verge of surrendering to the United States and Israel. To the contrary, Iran is demonstrating that it believes that time is on its side, and therefore it must continue not only resisting the U.S. and Israel, but also moving up the escalation ladder. Iran is responding to the American and Israeli aggression in a way which is designed to raise the costs for the United States so high that the Trump administration decides to halt the aggression against Iran, and furthermore becomes deterred from ever attacking Iran again. So even if Trump might want to wrap up this war quickly, I don't think there are any signs that the Iranians are ready to stop fighting.
Iranians could be ready to stop fighting. Now, we heard from Pete Hegseth as well, where he was talking about how the Americans and the Israelis are hitting targets at will. Pete Hegseth says that about 15,000 targets have been struck. But hearing what the American Secretary of War is saying, do you think the American side has a clear strategy on the objectives that it wants to achieve? Because the fact is, in this war that's now entering into its third week, the American side is not still clear as to what the objectives of this war are.
You're absolutely right. What we get from the Trump administration are many incoherent statements, was contradicting each other. Trump is contradicting others who serve in his administration. We don't really know exactly what the end game is for the White House, what victory, quote unquote, victory is in the Trump administration's eyes. That is still unclear now, 2 weeks into this conflict. Maybe the U.S. administration wants to essentially remove what it sees as the threats that Iran poses, nuclear program, missile program, the Iranian Navy, but then leave the regime in power in a much weaker place. Or maybe the Trump administration is totally aligned with the Netanyahu government in terms of wanting to fight further and only declare victory after the Iranian regime has fallen. Both of these agendas are ones that Trump has articulated in the past. So we don't really know where the administration stands. Very incoherent, very confusing, to say the least.